So, you want to make a character in D&D that walks the world with death at their side, snatching souls from the shadows, shuffling foes big and small off their mortal coils? Well, there's a rogue subclass for just that. Let's discuss the Phantom. Hi there, I'm just a second level fighter who likes talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and if you like the video, then consider checking out some of my other content and hitting the subscribe button. But enough of that, cause today we're covering the edgiest subclass for the edgiest class in 5th edition. Introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the Phantom Rogue is an overtly death-themed hide-and-sneaker. With the power to literally snatch souls in the final moments of life, these rogues walk the line between this world and what lies after. Now, the theme is obviously a bit on the spooky and macabre side, but the Phantom has a few unique tools at their disposal. Apart from their more generic ghostly abilities like phasing through solid objects and speaking to the recently departed, they can cleave through their enemies, bringing them to an early grave. A subclass that provides extra damage for a rogue is somewhat rare, particularly at low levels, or at least it was until the 2024 Player's Handbook showed up. But this is an exciting one, and I'll be completely honest, while everyone got super excited for the Soul Knife, which released alongside this subclass, I honed in immediately on the potential that this subclass offered. So, let's dive in and see what's what with the Phantom, and we're going to try something new this time. At the end of the video, I've included an example build progressing from 1 all the way up to level 20. Right, diving straight into the features the Phantom provides, we have 2 at 3rd level. Whispers of the Dead allows you to learn a thing or two from the voices of the recently deceased. Whenever you finish a short or long rest, you gain proficiency with a skill or tool of your choice. This is a fantastic little bit of versatility baked into the subclass. No matter what the challenges that lie ahead of your character may be, your ghostly acquaintances can help you prepare for them. Just don't let them talk you into choosing the wrong skill. Then your core feature is Wails from the Grave. This deals some extra necrotic damage to another target whenever you use your sneak attack, which is pretty much every single turn, if not twice per round with some shenanigans. Now, how this works is that you choose a secondary target within 30 feet of whoever is getting slammed with your sneak attack damage. This works with both melee and ranged attacks. You roll half the number of dice you normally would for sneak attack at your current level, rounded up of course. This happens directly after and is completely separate from your original sneak attack and therefore doesn't interact with critical hits in any way. It scales from a measly 2d6 necrotic damage at level 3 up to 5d6 at level 19. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest, so too when you get it and up to 6 times later on. However, this becomes largely irrelevant at higher levels due to another feature. I'll say it, the damage here isn't amazing, but it is damage. Not only that, it's damage to a secondary target, something entirely unique for a rogue, a class that specializes in focusing down single enemies with big damage. Later on, we'll discuss another option that pairs very nicely with the 2-target cleave playstyle that this feature opens up for our Phantom. At level 9, we get Tokens of the Departed. This feature literally allows you to briefly snatch the soul of a creature as they expire, holding onto it for a short time in the form of a trinket. Your DM decides the nature of said trinket, or if they're cool with it, you can roll on the trinket table in the player's handbook. Apart from the macabre roleplay potential, it turns out that holding a fragment of someone's soul has some interesting applications. While you have a soul trinket on your person, you have advantage on constitution and death saving throws, which translates to you being more difficult to get rid of. You can also destroy one of these trinkets to get a use of your Wails from the Grave feature for free, which is great and basically means it's active all the time. However, the most fascinating part of this feature is that you can destroy a trinket and immediately ask the spirit of the creature it belonged to a single question. They aren't obligated to answer truthfully or even in a coherent or helpful manner, but they do have to answer, and they're probably going to do it in the most concise way possible. The roleplay and information gathering potential here is immense, but you are going to stumble across a few choice interactions along your adventures with this aspect of the feature. To create a soul trinket, you must use your reaction when a creature within 30 feet of you dies, and you must have a free hand with which to catch that trinket. You can only have a number of trinkets equal to your proficiency bonus at any given moment, and these trinkets last indefinitely, so you can accumulate them over a few days if you wish. It is a little unfortunate about the reaction and free hand thing, as this means you will miss out on some reaction-based sneak attack shenanigans, and that taking the lightly armored feat for access to a shield is now completely out of the question, unless you happen to be a giant telepathic ant person. At level 13, we get Ghost Walk, and it does exactly what it suggests. You get a 10-foot fly speed, which is excruciatingly slow and does prove to be a limiting factor here. Additionally, you can pass through solid objects and creatures as if they weren't there, and all attack rolls made against you have disadvantage. However, while moving through them, they count as difficult terrain, and if you finish your turn inside an object or a creature, then you take 1d10 force damage. You do not get shunted out, so you can just tank the damage and exist inside another creature's space if you fancy. You activate and deactivate this feature with a bonus action, otherwise it lasts 10 minutes, and you must either take a long rest before using it again, or destroy one of your soul trinkets. Now, there are some glaring issues here. Using the fly speed it gives to move through stuff is very punishing, but you are a rogue and you can just dash or even double dash to boost your fly speed up to 30 feet, which is going to get cut down once you pass through difficult terrain. However, you don't strictly need to fly with this feature. Moving through the horizontal plane with your much more impressive ground speed is still an option. Then, the Phantom's capstone at 17th level is Death's Friend, and it's pretty strong. Whenever you use your whales from the grave, your initial target that you used sneak attack on now also takes the extra necrotic damage. This essentially means that you deal double damage with sneak attack and split it up unevenly between two targets. The damage here is actually pretty impressive, and while it doesn't rival the Assassin, it puts the Phantom pretty high on the ladder of damage potential for rogue subclasses. Additionally, if you finish a long rest and don't have any soul trinkets, one simply appears in your hand. The spirits of the departed are drawn to you, and the implications here from a world-building perspective are interesting to say the least. Let's cover a few things to keep in mind as a rogue. You obviously have a d8 hit die, which on its own will not make you super well suited to life on the front lines, and surprise surprise, that's where my interpretation of this subclass is going to end up going. However, there are a lot of other features that make this more palatable. As a rogue, you do get access to weapon mastery and can use any weapon so long as it is a simple weapon, or a martial weapon that has either the finesse or light properties. My suggestion here is a rapier. It is the hardest hitting melee weapon you have access to, and it has the Vex property, which gives you advantage on attack rolls against a target you've already struck successfully. Dexterity is your primary ability, and thanks to the 2024 PHB, you actually have features that scale off of it with saving throws and whatnot. But Dex gives you better initiative rolls, better attack rolls with finesse weapons, and better armor class, so pump it high. Then rogues are the specialist class or skill monkey class of D&D 5e. They have access to the highest number of skill proficiencies as well as expertise. They are extremely useful in situations where throwing ability checks at a problem will make it go away. They also get one more feat than other classes except the fighter, so they can be customized pretty well. A few more things to keep in mind. Rogues have cunning action, which means they always have the use of their bonus action available to hide, dash, or disengage. They can also take aim as a bonus action and give themselves advantage on their next attack roll on the current turn if they stand still. Then the big one, sneak attack is their main combat feature. This allows rogues to deal some pretty decent damage in a single attack. They must use a finesse or ranged weapon to do so, and they either need advantage on their roll or a nearby ally for it to work, but that's an easily overcome formality. Sneak attack can also only be used once per turn and scales as you level up. As a phantom, this enables your Whales from the Grave feature. Cunning Strike is a new addition from the 2024 PHB that adds some utility options to your sneak attack at the cost of damage dice. Anything from tripping your target, retreating safely, or even blinding them. It is great to have these options, but I must just add that your Whales from the Grave damage will not decrease if you end up using it alongside Cunning Strike, which is nice. Finally, rogues are incredibly slippery, in the most frustrating of ways most of the time. They are hard to pin down, and later on they get a few features that make it so that even if they are targeted, they end up scraping by. I will add that the Phantom in particular ends up having great saving throws except for strength with their soul trinkets and the slippery mind feature. These features do take some time to come online though. Alright, let's briefly discuss a few feat options that you might consider when building a Phantom. Piercer lets you re-roll a die once per turn and gives an extra die on a critical hit when dealing piercing damage, something that seems to happen more often due to rogues having advantage most of the time. This pairs well as most of the weapons that can be used for sneak attack also deal piercing damage. This is a bit of a roundabout way to get some extra damage though. I will just say that this also pairs nicely with Crossbow Expert if you want to go that route and dual wield hand crossbows, but I'm specifically avoiding that due to another option we'll discuss later. Shadow Touch gives you access to the invisibility spell and another first level necromancy or illusion spell. This is very thematic and mildly useful. Defensive Duelist is an amazing boost to survivability, however, it does require you to use your reaction, which you need to snatch souls, so keep that in mind. I'm going to call them out together, but Sentinel and Warcaster are two weirdly good options if you want to play around with opportunity attacks. Sentinel gives you some additional conditions to activate an opportunity attack, and Warcaster lets you use a cantrip instead of just a weapon attack. Considering when you make an opportunity attack, you can still use sneak attack, so this is an interesting choice if you happen to have a cantrip that also lets you use a weapon. Don't worry, we'll get there. I wouldn't suggest rushing either of these two feats though. Then, Speedy is great for moving faster and minimizing the danger of enemy opportunity attacks. It also allows you to ignore difficult terrain while dashing, which is amazing for your Ghost Walk feature. Skill Expert lets you embrace the Skill Monkey life and broaden your monopoly on ability checks. I'm going to mention Elven Accuracy here because it pairs well with rogues in general. Yes, it will lock you into being an elf, but as you'll see, there's a very good reason for a phantom to make that choice. Getting advantage on attack rolls is also easy as a rogue, particularly if you're using a vex weapon like a rapier. Another great thematic option is the Eldritch Adept feat. With it, you can pick up the Pact of the Blade invocation from the Warlock class. This lets you summon your own Ghost Blade that can deal necrotic damage if you like, and let you use Charisma instead of Dexterity for attack rolls. For Origin feats, we have 3 competitive options. Not shouting out tough this time, but remember that it will always still exist. But picking up Magic Initiate and taking Green Flame Blade from the Wizard spell list is an awesome synergy with your Whales from the Grave feature. Green Flame Blade lets you cleave a nearby target for some fire damage and lets you make an attack with a weapon so you can deal sneak attack damage on your primary target. Lucky is just awesome on a rogue, as giving yourself advantage in a situation where you simply cannot get it lets you keep sneak attacking and doing your thing. It also pairs well with Vex weapons and of course Elven Accuracy. Finally, Alert is good if you want to go sooner in the initiative order or if you want to swap places with a party member. For species, you probably saw this coming, but I mentioned Elven Accuracy and a Wizard cantrip. So, High Elf is the main suggestion I'm going with here. They get access to any wizard cantrip of their choice, and they can even change it whenever they finish a long rest. So, if you know that the fire damage from Green Flame Blade is going to end up getting resisted, you can just go with Booming Blade instead. You also get proficiency in an extra skill, Dark Vision, resistance to being charmed, and the Detect Magic and Misty Step spells. Also, your ears are pointy, and that's just awesome. Now, it's a bit of a cop-out, but the Reborn lineage from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft is a great thematic choice for the Phantom. Maybe you have such an intense connection to spirits due to the fact that you might be somewhat of a host for them. Who knows? Anyway, Reborn adventurers get to keep any special movement speed from their original species. They also don't need to eat, drink, or breathe and can finish a long rest in 4 hours by just staying still. They are resistant to poison and they do get advantage on death saves, which is something the Phantom already provides, but you can't win them all. Notably, as a Reborn, you get knowledge from a past life, which lets you add a d6 to ability checks. But as a Phantom Rogue, who said that knowledge had to be from your past life? Let's quickly cover a few multiclassing options for the Phantom. Just a note, multiclassing as a rogue will delay your sneak attack damage progression, and anything above a 1 level dip will prevent you from reaching the 10d6 maximum. However, some of these are absolutely worth the trade-off. Firstly, thank you to everyone that left a comment on the War Domain Cleric video and pointed out that that subclass is an amazing dip for rogues, if not just the straight-up best option. Apart from the cleric spells and access to heavy armor, the War Domain lets you make a weapon attack as a bonus action. This lets you sneak attack using your bonus action, and then use your action to ready either the attack action or even the magic action to cast a weapon attack cantrip like Green Flame Blade. This is significantly more reliable than counting on opportunity attacks to be able to use your sneak attack outside of your own turn. Then, just because we're focusing on the cleave aspect of the Phantom, taking 3 levels of Ranger and picking up the Hunter subclass gives you the Horde Breaker option from the Hunter's Prey feature. This lets you make an additional attack against a nearby target when you make a weapon attack on your turn. This just adds to the cleave potential here. Rangers also get a fighting style and some useful low-level spells to play around with. Finally, a 2-level dip into Warlock gives you some spellcasting, but more importantly, access to 3 Eldritch invocations. We already mentioned Pact of the Blade in the feats section, but there are some other awesome choices here, like taking an extra Origin feat, casting Disguise Self, False Life, or Jump at will, some of the other pacts, and of course Agonizing Blast to pump out Eldritch Blast as a decent range damage dealing option. You can also focus on Charisma as your primary stat here as an alternative. Thematically for this choice, maybe your powers come from the spirits you speak with. There are obviously both the Undead and Undying subclasses to dive into if you want to sink in more levels here. Okay, let's go over how I might go about actually building a Phantom Rogue. We're not going to go in excruciating detail, but I'll give you an idea of what options I'd choose and what type of damage this thing is capable of at a few points in its adventuring career. So, we're picking High Elf as our species as it gives us a cantrip and lets us take Elven Accuracy later on. For abilities, we're using point buy and we want 15 dexterity, 14 intelligence, and 13 constitution. Now, you could swap out the intelligence for wisdom or charisma, but I like intelligence here. Personal preference. As for what to do with the 3 remaining abilities, it isn't terribly consequential, and you can basically do whatever you want. For our background, we're going custom. Take a +2 to dexterity, bringing it up to 17, and a +1 to constitution, bringing it up to a very respectable 14. I'm choosing lucky as our origin feat for some on-demand advantage. This pairs nicely with both Elven Accuracy and the Vex weapon we're going to use, as it gets the advantage train rolling. For skills, well, you can take whatever you like. Personally, I wouldn't stray too far from the general rogue stuff like Sneak and Sleight of Hand, but maybe the spirits have taught us a thing or two that adds to our versatility. Then we're going to be picking up a rapier immediately and using it in combination with Green Flame Blade. However, until you reach level 3, you don't have any subclass features, and maybe you want to use Booming Blade instead for some higher damage potential. As we progress, we're going to pick up Elven Accuracy immediately when we hit level 4. This feat is addictive, and because we're all in on the advantage train, it's awesome. I will just mention that the biggest upside of Elven Accuracy is that it makes it so you almost never miss an attack roll, but having a 14.3% crit chance is nice too. This brings our dex up to 18 at this level, which means more accuracy, damage, and armor class. We're taking Piercer at level 8 because it synergizes well with everything we're doing. The additional damage on crits is minor, but re-rolling your rapier damage every turn is nice. We're at 19 dexterity now. At level 10, we have a choice to make, defensive duelist or speedy. I'm going with speedy here because our reaction is going to be devoted to snatching souls and making opportunity attacks. I would have loved to have taken Charger here or even earlier, but we don't take the attack action when casting Green Flame Blade, so that is kinda sad. You could also take another feat here that increases dex, but movement speed is nice in my opinion. Our primary ability now sits at 20. At level 12 and 16, I've chosen to take Shadow Touched and Warcaster, and to increase our intelligence each time. I'll admit that these aren't strictly great options, and you could just go for flat ASIs here, or even ignore intelligence and go straight for constitution, but I want to cast invisibility and use Green Flame Blade as an opportunity attack for maximum cleave. Finally, at 19, I'm going with the boon of Irresistible Offense for our epic boon. This means that our piercing damage ignores resistance, and whenever we crit, we deal extra damage equal to the ability score used to make the attack. Considering we will be increasing our dexterity to 21 here, that's an extra 21 damage 14.3% of the time. A decent alternative would be the boon of combat prowess, which would make it so we literally never miss with an attack roll. However, our accuracy is already pretty high. Personal preference here. Finally, let's quickly take a look at the damage output of a sneak attack and Wails from the Grave combo at 3 major points in our adventuring career. We're completely ignoring resistance to damage here, and we're only using Green Flame Blade. Also, we're assuming we actually hit a target, so here's the average damage on both the primary target and the secondary target, which will be standing very considerately at 5 feet away from each other. Is this a realistic way to look at damage output? Hell no. But it's interesting to see what happens when we get to do the thing we've been trying to build for. I'll also give the average damage of a crit, which won't affect how much damage the secondary target takes. Anyway, at 5th level, our Green Flame Blade and Sneak Attack damage have scaled somewhat. We would deal 23.5 damage on our primary target and 13.5 damage on the secondary target, or 43 damage on a critical hit. I won't lie, it doesn't look terribly impressive at this level, but keep in mind that it is in line with other rogue builds, and the cleave damage helps it stand out. At 11th level, the next point cantrip scale, we deal 39.5 damage to our primary target and 21.5 damage to the secondary. The critical deals a big 78.5 damage here. As you can see, the damage is scaling up really nicely at this point. Finally, I've chosen max level as the last point of reference. We deal a mighty 75.5 damage on average to the primary target and 34 to the secondary, and our crit smack for 154 damage on average, which, while not at the same apocalyptic level as the assassin on their first turn alpha strike, it blows all the other rogue subclasses out of the water in terms of single big hits. So yeah, the damage the Phantom can put out with Green Flame Blade is pretty competitive, at least in the context of what rogues are capable of. I did not factor in the reroll from Piercer, but it's not hugely significant. Obviously, at the end of the day, this is all meaningless and doesn't take many factors into account, and your experience in an actual game may vary wildly. But like I said, it's interesting nonetheless. Alright, that was the Phantom Rogue. Probably my favorite rogue subclass if I'm honest. mostly for the roleplay potential, and I think Green Flame Blade is underrated. Anyway, if you've made it this far in the video, then you're a legend and I really appreciate you. Do you find looking at how much damage certain builds or combos can do to be interesting? Personally, I do, and I'd like to dive into it a bit more with these subclass guides, or reviews, or whatever we're calling them. But I think I'm going to keep it to oddly specific and wholly meaningless scenarios mostly. But yeah, that'll do it for this one. Cheers.